Hi, my name is Kirsi, and I'm a volunteer at Mellemfolkeligt Samvirke, Aarhus. This podcast is a part of the project Our Food, Our Future. The project focuses on achieving a socially just and sustainable food system. A food system which is human rights based and driven by agroecological principles. Today, I have come to visit the lovely Høsteriet in Høsteriet. It's very, very, very beautiful out here, and the sun is shining, the birds are singing, and it's wonderful to be here. I have come here to talk with the founder of Høsteriet, Marie. Welcome to the podcast, Marie.
Thank you.
Could you tell a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yes. So I grew up in southern Jutland, close to the German border, on an organic farm that my parents run. My mom, she has a restaurant there, and my father, he runs the farm, basically. And I grew up being very much a part of their work life, both in the kitchen and out on the fields. And I remember as a teenager, I thought, this is not for me. This is really not for me. And I thought that farming looked like a lot of hard work and a lot of struggle. But then I took some gap years after high school, and I went on a folk high school, Vestjyllands Højskole, and I bumped into a class about permaculture and organic innovation, it was called. And I totally got hooked on that. And I found myself shortly after on Kallø Landbrugsskole and became an organic farmer. And since that, it's just been a journey, diving into organic and regenerative farming and learning a lot and being many places in internships. And after some years with teaching in this subject, I decided to move here to Aarhus and start a place myself. So that's very roughly about how I ended up here. Mm-hmm. And I've now rented a little piece of land here in Høsteriet outside of Aarhus. And in the very first season of this, vegetable production of farms life. Mm. Yeah, so it's very exciting.
Yeah, and let's dig a little deeper here. And can you tell a little more about Høsteriet and what is the principles behind it?
Yes. So Høsteriet has been a dream I've had for many years, and it's slowly taken form. And I started it just last autumn, so it is really just half a year old. And I started it from scratch on a bare field. We have just been a little tour, and there is now a few greenhouses, and we are making a watering system, and there is a little place where I could say a cabin maybe, or a shed where we will make a packing and washing station. So it's still very basic and primitive, but it's a beginning on building this small vegetable farm, as I've dreamt of for quite some time. And it's quite tiny in terms of, area-wise. It's only 6,000 square meters, which is half a hectare.
Yeah, only half a hectare.
Yeah, and that is, in agricultural world, that is
teeny tiny.
So small and basically looked upon as a hobby. But I see a really big value in being this small, and the way I want to farm, or the way I am farming, is much more, low practical, or it's not about running a really, really big piece of land. It's more about diversifying and intensifying on a small area and showing that we can grow really, really a lot of food and create abundance on a small place. So for me, being big is not a goal. It's much more about diversifying and being a functioning little place. Yeah. And if we have to look into the principles, I have 4 key principles that I really try to work around in this production. And the one is working for soil health, so improving soil quality. The second is sustainability, that I really try to minimize use of electricity and water and diesel and other things that can leave a footprint, a negative footprint. Then it's about biodiversity, that I want to create a production that also invites insects and wild animals in a extent that my farm can carry. So hopefully I won't invite a whole flock of deer in to eat my cabbage, but at least make it a place where wild organisms can also thrive and find food and maybe even shelter. And the last one is that it also has to be a social project that invites people in, and that also spread information and knowledge about growing food and about the importance of being close to the food we eat, and understanding what is in season and where does our food come from and how is it made. So for me, that's the 4 key values that I really try to strive towards in a way. And then the 5th maybe is that it has to function financially. That's like the odds I have to make function somehow. But that's not money has never been the driver in this project at all. It's much more about doing something good and turning climate frustration and frustration over being a small individual in a world where things are done in a way I don't like, and I need to turn that frustration and energy into something real. And for me, that is the true driver behind this project, that I want to do something good. And then I have to live of it. And that's what I'll try to figure out the next few years, how that will work. But I hope it will work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that those are some really strong core principles, and the financial part is also just so important. Doing these podcasts, I've learned that actually a lot of farmers, they are in debt doing what they do, which is kind of shocking to hear, because you would think they have these massive farms, then they must produce a lot and get a lot of money, but that's not really the case.
No.
But like talking, I would like to also go more in depth with all the principles, but since we're already on the money subject, do you get some subsidies? Do you get some support of any kind?
Yeah. No, as it is now, I don't get any subsidies. And it's mainly because I'm small. And there has been there's a new, package enrolled for new farmers and for young farmers. It's called etableringsstøtte til unge jordbrugere, which is very new from this year, actually. And it's, as it is now, I will not qualify for it, because the way they calculate working hours is very based on big industrial scale vegetable productions. So when I count together how many work hours I have on my piece of land according to their numbers, I'm not even qualified for a part-time subsidy. But in reality, I'm working.
Madness.
Yeah, it is actually crazy. And it's, all vegetable growers know that there is a lot of work in producing food like this, and especially working in greenhouses and working with crops like herbs and salads is labor intensive. But I would have to become bigger in order to qualify for these subsidies. And nevertheless, I think subsidies are very difficult, and there's a lot of bureaucracy, and there's no certainty for that you will get them. And there are many things. And the Danish government, as the only government in Europe, will also take taxes on the subsidy I get. So I have, maybe if I qualify for a part-time subsidy, they will first have to take taxes off from that, and then I will get a lesser pay, or a lesser amount of subsidy. So, and that's actually very unique for Denmark. No other country does that. So yeah, it's, as it is now, I don't qualify for subsidies.
But how much land would you have to have in order to qualify for subsidies? Do you know?
Well, I think I should actually just upscale to 1 hectare. Then I could actually, with this new etableringsstøtte. But in the old system, you had to have at least 2 hectares. And as you says, that's hectare based, so you get something per hectare, and obviously that will be good for the ones with a lot of land and bad for the ones with little land.
Yeah, and I think it's also, I don't know, like a bit hypocritic, because when you have more land, then you also have an easier time acquiring even more land in order to get more subsidies. But as when you have a very small patch of land, then it's harder to kind of grow from there, especially if you don't get any support. And even though, as you said, you have around half a hectare, like this can provide a lot of food. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of, it's kind of sad to see that, I don't know, people don't respect it. And as you said, they look at you and they say that it's a hobby instead of proper full-time work, which it actually is in reality. So it's kind of a crazy blind spot, I think.
It is, and we have become a very industrialized farm country here in Denmark, and it's a bit shame if you look to countries like Sweden and Norway. They are way better at taking care of the small farmers, and there are much more of them in general.
But if we turn our eyes to those core principles, so something a bit more optimistic, then the first one was that you are doing soil improvement.
Yeah.
Could you tell, what is special about it? And are the other farmers doing it? And is it like a norm in the agriculture or if it's something different?
So building soil or improving soil is a core fundament of being a regenerative farmer. And I know that all farmers want to have a fertile soil, because a fertile soil is also equally with high, big amounts of crops or very healthy crops. But the way we farm today, with a lot of plowing and intensive tillage and disturbance of our soil, and we also in some cases use fungicides and chemical fertilizer or pesticides, that all lowers the quality of the soil and lowers the amount of organic material in the soil, and potentially turns fertile soil into less fertile soil. And in general, there is a quite poor condition of our farming soil in Denmark. So for me, it's very important to make sure that when I grow food, I at the same time also improve the soil quality. And that I do by not plowing at all, and of course not using any fungicides or herbicides or anything like that, because it has to be organic. And then I do everything I can to incorporate a lot of green manures and cover crops. And green manures and cover crops are basically just crops you grow not to harvest, but to improve the soil. So it's a way of being aware of that you have to grow something for the soil's sake once in a while, because we cannot just harvest and take, and we will mine the soil eventually. And then I work with soil cover, so I try my best to, every time there is a bare spot, I will put on hay or straw to avoid the soil from drying out, basically. Yeah. So there are many ways of getting around this, improving your soil health, and many of them are not so easy to work with in big scale farming. But slowly, luckily, they are getting more and more, popular. And even some conventional farmers have stopped to plow. And it's called conservational agriculture, because they have also seen the advantages of letting our soil be instead of constantly plowing it. But it's a really, really big project, and plowing is the fundament of our entire agricultural culture. It's the implement we use. It's where it all started, with the plow, in a way, agriculture. So it's really hard to figure out another way of farming.
But it's important if, continuing with plowing, then in the end, can't it be that the soil becomes completely infertile and nothing can really grow there? So then it's also kind of a dead land.
Yeah, exactly. That's the fear, that we could end up simply destroying our food fundament, or the fundament of our food production, and we really have to take care of the soil. It is the fundament for all civilizations, that we have a good fertile soil.
Well, to move on to the next core principle, you named sustainability.
Yeah.
How do you work for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's really been important for me to make low footprint food, so that I can ensure the people who buy this, that there is a low carbon dioxide footprint in general. And the first thing I've done while building the farm has been to buy as much as I could get hold on secondhand. So both greenhouses and and all the plant tables and a lot of the building materials and even some of the plastic I have found secondhand and reused. So it's been important for me not to buy too much new things in. And that's also important because I started on a low budget. So it was essential that it had to be secondhand. Yeah. Then it's really important for me to sell to people that are very close to my production. So I don't want to drive the food very far. I will have to deliver to Aarhus once in a while, of course, but that is maximum of 10 to 15 kilometers, and that's still very local compared to how much food is transported around. So I really want to keep it local. And I also want that because I think there is a big quality in the customers knowing the face of the one producing their food. I really like this idea of a small community having a farmer that they know, and they could go down on the field and look at the vegetables and the flowers, and 2 days later they can come and get their share of the harvest. And I just think that closeness and nearness to a community is just so important, both because of sustainability, but also of so many other social and life quality aspects that I think is really healthy for human life in general. Yeah. So the fact that it's local and the fact that it's secondhand, a lot of the things I use, but also I don't use heating in my greenhouses. So I really try to have basically no electricity used in the production. Plus I don't use a tractor. So I don't have any diesel, or very, very little. I have a little rotiller that takes a very small amount of gas, but in general, most of the power in this farm comes from human power, and that is, in my opinion, sustainable. And of course, it's hard work often, but it also means involving other people, and in my case, a lot of friends and family, and that leads to the next core point, which is the social community around farming. So in my point, it's just an advantage of taking the tractor out, because suddenly you need more hands, and everyone knows that it's more nice to do things with other people. And just the last 3 days, I've been out there with at least 4 to 5 people every day, just friends and friends of friends coming by and helping and enjoying the sun. And we have worked full days, and everyone leaves from there and just like, this was so nice. What a holiday I had here. And it just, it makes me so happy that the pureness of just physical work in sunshine can, and good company can give people joy in that way. I think it's so nice. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think people have also forgotten about it a little bit.
Yeah.
Kind of how nice it is to actually work with your hands outside.
Yeah.
And just like how invigorating it is to have this fresh air. And also another aspect is to know where the vegetables come from and how it's done.
Yeah.
Because I think nowadays everybody's used to going to a supermarket to buy all the vegetables, the fruits and everything. And there are not that many that think about where are those fruits and vegetables actually coming from.
Yeah.
So like to have a local farmer like you and be able to come here, work with you, and then have a subscription or become a member of the community to get some vegetables. It's like, I think, something we need more of.
Yeah, I agree. And I really hope, my big hopes could also be over the next year to involve many young people in this and hopefully inspire more, because I think we need more hands in the farming or the agricultural world in general. There are really, really a lot of old people, and at some point they have to retire, but the amount of new young people that goes into farming is very small. And I think it's because the farming industry doesn't have a good reputation, and it doesn't, there are many things about farming that is not really inviting for young people, but I really want to show that we can do it in other ways, and you don't have to buy a farm for 30 millions and have 3,000 cows to be a farmer. You can also,
But how do you reach out to people? How do you build this community?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, just being the place where I am has been a huge advantage. My place is, you saw it. It's near a path, and it's inside Andelssamfundet Hjortshøj. And Hjortshøj in general is a very active and open-minded little village. And the fact that 90% of the people in Hjortshøj walk just past my field when they go on their daily trip means that I have every day many people coming into my greenhouse and asking and just chatting and talking. And I think just that in itself has made a whole, I really feel connected to the people in this area, and people feel like they have so much goodwill towards this project. And then in terms of reaching out further, for example, to Aarhus, I think stuff like sitting here with you is a great opportunity for me to reach out and share the things I'm doing and the fact that I'm here. And I will just have to be around and wave the flag once in a while. I try my best to run a active Instagram, even though that's quite new for me, but I also think that social medias have their power today. And
they're on social media accounts. You can add your homepage as well. You have a beautiful homepage.
Thank you.
so that I will add it, of course, in the links, so everybody has an access to it. And then actually, talking of that, I would like to ask you about those subscriptions, that people could have through your farm. Could you tell us about that? Yeah.
So the core income in my business is vegetable subscriptions, and that basically means that people buy an entire season, and every week they will get an amount of vegetables that they can pick up either here in Hjortshøj or at Café Mellemfolk in Aarhus. So it's a way for me to ensure that the things I harvest has already been sold. Because the big problem with being a vegetable producer is that there's a lot of waste. And for example, if I had to go to markets, I would harvest in the morning, pack it in my car, go and put up my market stand, and then I would maybe only sell 20%, and I would have a lot of waste. Whereas when I know what I have sold beforehand, and I know I have maybe 40 families that have paid beforehand, then every time I go harvesting, I know that there is a customer for each of the carrots I pull up and all of the salad heads. I can much more reduce the waste, and it gives a really big economical security as a farmer to have the payment beforehand. Because there are so many insecurities in being a farmer with weather and diseases and crops that fails and stuff like that. So having a subscription is just a really, really nice stability. Plus, it gives me a customer base that follows me for at least half a year at a time. And it gives me lots of opportunities to communicate with them and connect with them, to invite them to the farm, to share recipes on the things they get, and to nearly I see this vegetable box as a part, kind of like a educational box as well, because of subscription, because they will get so much in touch of what is in season. And they will know so well after a season that what do you eat in the spring and what do you eat in the autumn if you want to eat with the season. And I know for some people that this will be challenging because they'll have to cook with things they're not used to. And for me, that's just so great that I can help private people in their kitchen to broaden their perspective on what they can eat and incorporate more different vegetables in their diet. So there are many reasons why I chose this, and there are so many good aspects of these subscriptions that I like.
I saw that one had like a possibility to have 4 vegetables for a week. Does it mean like it's 4 different types of vegetables of certain sorts, or how does it work?
Yeah, so we have 3 different box of subscriptions, and one is the very small with 4 enheder or vegetables, and that just means that one vegetable could be a cabbage head, and another could be a tray of tomatoes, and another could be a big bunch of carrots, and the 4th one could be a big bunch of parsley and dill, for example. And that fits well for 1 or 2 people, maybe someone living alone. And then you just pick up that each week, and you never know what will be in the box. So it's a bit challenging for the ones that are used to shopping after a recipe or stuff like that. But my hope is that people will like this and see it as an inspiration as well to try new things.
That sounds amazingly sustainable and beautiful.
Yeah, I agree.
To move on to the aspect of that you are a female farmer. I am myself a volunteer at a feminist group. And I have perceived agriculture to be a pretty male-dominated field. And I would like to ask about your experience in it as a woman.
Yeah, well, it's a really good question because it's quite, I think here in Denmark, agriculture is really man-dominated. And I think it is in general in Europe. It's very male-dominated area. And when I went to agricultural school, I went first on the organic one, where we were actually more female than men, which was extremely atypical. Then I went to a conventional school, and I was the only girl in the entire class. There were 4 girls at the whole school out of 120 men or something like that. And that's way more the classical picture in agriculture, is that there is very, very few women and a lot of men. And the few women that are there are typically working with cows and calves. Somehow there are need of more, now it's very stereotypical, but more soft touch in a way when you work with calves and animals. Whereas the plant-focused people that have to drive a lot of tractor, it was only men. But in the organic school, and that is really funny to me, there's a lot of women. And I think the organic part of farming attracts much more female farmers than the conventional does. Yeah, and that's just nice, I think, that it's a way for more females to get into this field. But then if you look at the big picture, actually, if you look worldwide, 50% of all food is produced by women and 50% is produced by men. And if you look at developing countries, around up to 80% of the food is produced by women. So worldwide, women are producing just as much food as men, but the industrialized agriculture has kind of sorted the women out of the production and left it with men and tractors and a few women to be in the stable around the cows. Maybe that's very roughly set up, but it is actually quite true. So if you look at traditional farming, and if you look to many other countries, also if you look to Eastern Europe, there will be much more female involved in farming. And I think that's so nice, and I'm so sad that farming has become a man-dominated field, actually. I think there is so much, it would value so much some more women, actually. It would be so healthy for the farming, yeah. And then I think my own experiences with being a female farmer is that a quite classical thing is that when you are a woman in a practical subject, that could be carpentry or farming or anything, it's just difficult actually. And I have had an impression of often when I've been in internships that me driving a tractor, I'm always asked twice, are you sure about you know how to do this? So there is a general, I don't know how to say that in English.
I was just thinking
distrust or something that I can actually do it. And it's also been really challenging for me starting up this project because I had to do a lot of stuff I never did before. I had to make concrete fundaments. I had to build greenhouses. I had to install watering system and figure out how do I install electricity, and a lot of carpentry stuff that I was not taught because that's not what you get to be taught as a young girl. I have two brothers that are much more handy in many ways. So I really felt like I had to re-educate myself in a kind of masculine way to be able to run a full farm. And it's very empowering to now I can say that I can actually build a greenhouse myself and I can do these things, and I can also drive a tractor kind of good now and stuff like that. But it's all of it feels out of my comfort zone and something I kind of have to fight a little bit extra for to get that experience. Yeah. But when that is said, I think there's only been good energy around me as a woman in agriculture. And you could also look upon that in Denmark, it's called landmand.
Mm-hmm.
So
already in the word.
Yeah, I'm actually an educated farm man. By education, I'm not an educated farm woman. And that is just such a clear picture of how farming has gone in Denmark, that it is male dominated. But I really think it will in the future hopefully be much more females in the farming industry.
Yeah, it's about time we get rid of those stereotypes as well. Mm-hmm. And I think it's so interesting you said that there's still a lot of female farmers all over the world. And it's actually the heavy machinery, that has somehow distanced women's roles or
It's the tractor.
It's the tractor.
It's so much the tractor. Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to also having more and more female farmers around Denmark. But talking about farming here in Denmark, how is it in general going? Are the farms getting bigger and bigger in terms of are we producing more and more vegetables and fruits and other things? Or is it actually in some areas getting smaller and smaller and we're importing more? Do you know what is the situation right now?
The situation is that farms get bigger and bigger area-wise, so that there is less and less farms, and the ones that are get bigger and bigger. And the sad thing is that they don't really produce fruits or vegetables. It's 1 or 2% of Danish agriculture that actually produce stuff like that.
Only 1 or 2%?
I think it's around that. 2% maybe that makes vegetables here in Denmark. Insane amounts of Danish agriculture is used for animal food production. So most of our farmland produce foods for the pigs and the cows we have. And that is how our landscape looks. So most of the grain and corn we see and canola will go into animal food production. And then it will be turned into pork or milk. And much of that will be exported, especially the pork will be exported to other countries. So in a way, you could say that we are moving to, less and less farms, but bigger and bigger. And then there is this tiny little movement, which I am a part of, where it's very small farms and very diversified and very local. And it's a reaction on the fact that our farming industry has become so industrialized. I'm sure that that's what happens, that this direction of small-scale, local, organic farms is because there's a longing for something like that, and we have lost it in our big agriculture somehow. So you can say that if you look at agriculture very general in Denmark, the contrasts are getting bigger. big farms are getting bigger and bigger, and the small farms are getting more and more diversified, and luckily they are there. But the middle-sized farms that there have been a lot of before, they don't really exist any longer because they cannot run around financially. So a lot of middle-sized farms have closed down, and their land has been bought by the big farms so they could become even bigger.
Wow. In terms of like this diverse vegetables, you said around 1 or 2% of the Danish farms are actually producing the vegetables that we eat. How many different vegetables are there?
Yeah, that are produced in Denmark.
That are produced in Denmark. And has there been any change recently?
So in general, we only produce, we import 70% of all the vegetables we eat in Denmark, even though we have a climate and a soil that is really, really good for vegetable production. And I think Denmark is traditionally a really kale and root country, and that is really the fundament of our food culture. But because we have to in Denmark to compete with the prices on vegetables from other places in Europe, like for example Southern Europe, it's really, really hard for vegetable farmers to compete with that price because we have higher expenses and higher salaries in Denmark in general. So vegetable production moves to other countries than Denmark. And for example, from now on, it will be impossible to buy Danish peas in Denmark because it cannot run around financially for the farmers to produce peas. Danish peas are just such a important thing in for Danish people. It's like our kale or our potatoes. It's good sweet peas. So that's really a loss, I think, and a sign of that we need to somehow also systematically take care of that we can grow food in Denmark for ourselves and not be outcompeted by the open market. I also know that things like curly kale, which is a grønkål, which is just such a base food in the winter here in Denmark, it's nearly impossible to financially grow that with an actual revenue or with actually earning something on it. So even that, which is such a fundamental vegetable for Danish people, is really hard to live off growing here in Denmark. And I think that's a sign of a general problem in our food production, that's so difficult to live off producing these things for people.
If you could change something in the food production, what would you change? How could this get better? Systematically.
That's such a good question. I think there are many things that have to change, but I think one of the really, really important thing is that people in general get more informed about the production of their food. And I know it's a big thing to ask of people because we have so much to deal with in our daily life and there are so much information and work we have to do. But I think knowing where your food comes from is really important. And I think if we raise the awareness and knowledge of the way our food are produced, I think we would have a much higher interest in eating local. I'm actually sure about that. And also a much higher interest in eating seasonable food instead of importing so much. The most eaten vegetable in Denmark is tomatoes. And we have, if we go just 60 years back, we have no food culture of eating tomatoes because tomatoes is a Southern Europe vegetable but we have just taken it in and we have forgotten that we are a root and kale vegetable land somehow, and it would be much more sustainable if we ate that here. So I think awareness is really important. Then I think the supermarkets carry a really big responsibility in not being in making sure to buy vegetables in from Danish producers instead of buying them in from foreign producers. Of course they can do that, but they really have to make sure that they support the local farmers. And supermarkets have very high standards. They have very, strict regulations to how the vegetables have to look. And I think the supermarkets have to lower their restrictions in order for the small producers to have a chance to get their vegetables into the supermarkets as well. Otherwise, the small producers, as me, feel that it's necessary to sell our vegetables outside of the supermarkets somehow. Yeah, but there are so many things. There's also an educational question, and we as Danish people have to eat more vegetables, basically. There is, I think, whenever people ask me, how do I live more sustainable, the first thing I say is eat less meat. Because eating less meat solves so many problems. Plus it's healthy and it's cheap and there is no bad things about eating less meat. So we also have to, as Danish people, to let go of all that meat we put in ourselves and eat more vegetables. And we have to rediscover cooking with the vegetables that are in season. So it's so complex to fix this food system because it's, and you for sure also know that how many links there in it. And the responsibility lays both by us as private people, by the supermarkets, by the farmers and by the politicians. But as a private person and also as a small vegetable producer, I can only work with the very direct, and then I cross my fingers that there's somebody in the government and in the supermarkets that also help in this process. But that's their responsibility and they have to do that.
So leading from that, do you think we should all be farmers?
Yeah. I think that could be healthy maybe in some ways, but I don't think as the modern world look now that is a possibility any longer. At one point we were nearly all of us farmers, and still a huge percentage of the world's population live of farming. I think actually it's 20% worldwide of people that live of farming. So that's a lot, but it's also very little in a way. And I think we would all I think it would be healthy for all of us to somehow be a little bit closer to our food. I think it would be so lovely if more people spent time in their garden, if more people grew their parsley themselves instead of buying them in these terrible pots and plastic in the supermarkets, and if more people discovered how easy it is to grow chard or have some curly kale in their backyard that can supply them with abundance of green leafy stuff over the summer. So I think it would be really good for us all to spend more time in our gardens if we have one. If we don't have gardens, try to look for garden communities in the cities, and if we don't have time for that stuff, spend a little bit of time on figuring out how can I support a small local farmer? How can I make sure that what I buy is produced close by and with some ethical thoughts and with some caretaking of the soil? I really think that no matter how busy and lots of stuff we do in our life, I just think that caring for the food we eat is the fundament of a good life. And I think if we don't take care of what we eat or where it comes from, we will lose on our own health and we will lose on the world's health. And it's such you are what you eat, right? It's so important, and we cannot forget what we are made of and where we come from. And therefore I think the interest of food should not be for a small group called foodies or for a small group of people called especially dedicated vegetarians that are people that are interested in our environment. It should be all of us that think more about the food we put in ourselves and the health and environmental consequences it has. So yes, in a way we should all be farmers. Or we should. I would wish that we in higher degree engaged ourselves in the farms that we have in our local community, and that we support and grow more ourselves. But of course I can never decide what people have to do. I can just tell about what I do. Yeah.
My last question was actually, what can we do, to help along to this trend and help out small farmers and all? And I think, partly or in a big part already, you have answered the question, but maybe do you have anything to add to that? Like, what can we do to kind of help along to this change?
Yeah. Be curious. And I think a lot can start in our own kitchens, actually. Just starting to be informed about what is in season, and just starting to, when you go to the supermarket, be aware of what is produced in Denmark. Surprisingly, a lot is produced in Spain and Italy and other countries, and already there it starts to be a realization of how much we import. And I'm not saying that it's bad to support farmers in Spain or Italy, not at all, but sustainability wise and health-wise, I really think starting to cook with seasonal products is a huge advantage already there. And that could be just saying less pasta and tomato sauce and maybe more soups with kale and potatoes during the winter. That's like a little tiny step. Then, of course, I think supporting organic farmers is really good, because there are less pesticides used, and there are in general some caretaking of our soil there. And then if you're more dedicated, it is going into, is there any food corporations I could support? Is there any local farms I could buy from? Are there any farm shops around? If you are especially dedicated, I think you should start an agricultural school or engage yourself in volunteering at different farms. Or there are so many possibilities, and I think it all starts with what we have on our plate, and you can really go many directions from there. Yeah,
that sounds great. There is a lot of work to do, people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it all starts just from being open to change and being open to these different ways of doing things. I think that's it from my side. I want to thank you so much for your time, Marie. It's been so wonderful to be out here and see where you work, and I'll definitely come back.
Yeah.
and I hope many of you listeners will also come by and as you said, your farm is all about building this community. So you have an open mind for people coming and also order these vegetables and get something that is local.
Yeah.
I think that is a big change already.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for this inspiring conversation.
Thank you.
This podcast was produced with the financial support of the European Union. Its contents are the sole responsibility of ActionAid Denmark and do not necessarily reflect the views of the European Union. We've got a lot going on in Mellemfolkeligt Samvirke Aarhus. We are a Danish NGO that works for a more just and sustainable world, collaborating with global partners worldwide as part of the ActionAid Alliance. Here in Aarhus, we have over 100 volunteers working together to run a not-for-profit cafe and campaign and educate in areas ranging from feminism and climate justice to anti-discrimination and economic inequality to queer issues and refugee rights. You can come down to Café Mellemfolk every day but Sunday for amazing food, drinks and events in a cozy cafe run by our lovely volunteers. You can also get involved with our events, activities and campaigns, and even running the cafe as a volunteer yourself. So check out our Instagram and Facebook to find out more about our cafe and our campaigns by looking up Café Mellemfolk or Mellemfolkeligt Samvirke Aarhus, or following the links in the episode notes. Thank you everyone for listening, and until next time, goodbye.